Hi, everybody. I'm Deacon Dave.
I'm layperson Lisa.
Welcome
Welcome
to
to
the
the
Deacon
Deacon
Dave
Dave
and
and
Layperson
Layperson
Lisa
Lisa
show.
show.
And so we are going to talk about, for September, we are going to talk about relationships. Okay, and this could be relationships of people that are married, could be, say, your relationship with Jesus,
Yes.
right? It
Mhm.
could be your relationship with any one of the Trinity. How's that?
Yes, absolutely.
Your relationship with your children,
hmm
relationship with your parents,
hmm
relationship with your pet.
Siblings
Oh, with your siblings? Anything
with
else?
maybe things at work, coworkers, bosses,
Relationship with friends?
with friends, anything that may cause you spiritual distress. In the spiritual mentor aspect of things.
So, we're going to talk about some general guidelines for relationships. So we'll also talk in the class about marriage, right? Because there's a lot about. Why don't we just start with that?
Okay.
Let's start with marriage.
Okay.
Okay. There's a lot in marriage, and obviously the church teaches that the purpose of marriage is to be procreative and unitive. And I think this idea of being unitive inside of a marriage is very, very important.
Yes.
And I think so often, like Lisa, with the many people that I meet with for prep for marriage,
hmm
and or the people like what you see on shows, I'm looking for my partner.
Okay.
And so people's understanding of a covenantal relationship, the one that God like has with us, like he doesn't break it,
Uh-huh.
that same sort of relationship exists inside of a marriage, right?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
it is intended to be for life
Yes.
until death do you part. Those words actually mean something.
Yes.
But I also think a partnership kind of um, says, okay, well,
This is my responsibility, this is yours, instead of like, hey, let's do this together.
exactly. And
Yeah.
and and so it also implies that, hey, I'm only going to give as much as you're giving.
hmm
Okay. And the reality of it is inside of a marriage, each spouse is supposed to be giving 100% of who they are.
Per person,
Yes,
which
per
is very
person,
important.
not in total.
Not 50,
That would
50,
be a partnership.
not 25, 75.
Right. And if let's just say my wife Debbie can only give 75% because she's struggling, there's something going on. Oh, well, I'm only going to give 75%.
You're going to give 125.
Exactly. Right. So, I mean, part of being in a relationship with a spouse is to will the good of the spouse,
hmm
right? And to be there for them. I mean, all of these things that we hear in the marriage vows, now it's all about the rage is all, write your own vows, do all of this stuff. What are you looking at?
Well, now our light is not blinking.
Well, I'm hoping this is okay.
Yes, okay.
I'm not going to pause it. We're just going to do
Go
20
with it.
minutes, and if it's silent, then they can read our lips. It's probably what's going to happen now. But just stop looking at the light because it's like,
It's right in my face, I'm
here,
sorry.
let me cover the.
I can't even see the
No,
screen.
nobody can see what you're talking about, Lisa. What are you talking about? But that it's like, okay, vows are like, oh, well, you write your own vows, you do all of
mm
this stuff. It's all,
Is it
fairly.
allowed in the Catholic Church?
Oh no.
Okay, that's good.
Negatory. There are a set of readings.
Yeah. Well, you get to pick out of a certain selection, pre-selected,
Yeah,
right?
there are readings, right? Old, new, responsorial psalm, and gospel, but there's also set options,
Yes,
okay, which
yes.
I just right over here, Lisa, as it turns out, marriage book.
We should have raced and see who could have got there.
I probably would have run over my feet that don't have shoes on right
Oh, yeah, I saw
now. So you can see I like to mark my book up because there's different options. But when you look at it, for example, okay, there's some options inside the order of matrimony.
Okay.
For example, okay, you have the consent, which is where they would say, I, David, take you, Debbie, to be my wife. I promise to be faithful to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, to love you and to honor you all the days of my life.
Mhm.
So that's one option. Then another option is I, David, take you, Debbie, for my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part.
Which is a more popular one.
I usually end up doing the first one,
Okay.
although I don't like lawful wife.
Yeah, I don't care for that. That
Yeah,
doesn't.
right. I like the other way.
Hmm.
And then you could also just do it in question form.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually those two I read, but instead it's a question.
Oh, how often do you do that?
Pretty much never. And I would never really encourage that.
Oh, you don't offer it. You're just like, hey, I'm doing option one.
No, I let them, but I do
Okay.
think it's important for them to say their vows. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty, what you say, you don't get to like write your own stuff.
Hmm.
It doesn't work that way. It's it's not in the book that says you can do it your own way.
Right.
Okay. Like if you go to the beginning, I don't know if it's in these, but like for the funeral book, see all the stuff in red.
Yeah.
They always tell us to do the red, say the black.
Right.
Well, the red tells you the things that you can do.
Okay.
Okay. But the black is what you're supposed to read. Okay. So, yes, no, Lisa, to answer your question in a very lengthy way, you cannot write your own vows.
I don't think I asked that question. You just said.
I'm sorry. You can't write your own vows, people.
Yeah.
So I think that oftentimes part of a relationship too is so it's like dealing with a lot of different people that have a lot of different things going on, and I just kind of want to connect uh, the two become one in a relationship. And I think oftentimes, and this is why the church tries to do a good job of doing an inventory of everything that's going on in people's lives,
Hmm.
right? And then you meet with them and you maybe send them on a retreat so that they can have real time to talk about things. But many people enter marriage with a warped view of what marriage actually is,
Sure.
partnership versus covenant.
Right.
But they also enter into it with a lot of baggage.
Yes.
And so this is why, number one, each individual, okay, should have a strong relationship with God because God should be the center of the relationship that they have with one another.
Hmm.
And so if you have a strong relationship with God, a lot of things, okay, and I'm not saying that your spouse can't work with God to help reconcile things that have happened in your life, but primarily we should be like, okay, God, here are the things that you and I both know I'm struggling with. These are things that aren't reconciled with you. And I want to get straight with you on these things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Otherwise, many of these things, most of the time, get carried into the marriage.
Sure.
And depending on the couple, can create a lot of disruption, dissonance, trouble, problems with with the marriage.
Yeah. So do you spiritually direct a couple before they get married? Or like you wouldn't call it that as far as the inventory and the meeting together?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So yes, they could be spiritually directed, but yes, it's like you have, number one, people have the right to be married.
Okay.
Okay. And I've had everything from people who are like really get it to people that don't get it.
Sure.
And so you do the very best you can to prepare people for marriage, uh, so that they can have the best chance of success, which is really in and around Jesus. But some of the things, like disparity of worship, which is we
Hmm.
come from different faith
Yeah.
backgrounds. Well, me and Debbie came from different faith backgrounds, but it worked out okay. But I think there are, let's like when you go through the marriage inventory, it asks you about everything from children to your families to your perspective on anything and everything,
Hmm.
so that you can compare notes with one another because you've taken these questionnaires separately. And so it reveals areas that have not been talked about.
Okay.
And then part of the marriage prep is to then talk about those things in a real way.
Have most people already talked about them?
No,
Really?
no. Everything from not talking about having kids to not talking about the impact of their families on one another to not talking about finances and how they're going to keep their finances, whether they're separate or together. And one would think that, oh, These would be obvious things to talk about, but they're not, people.
Well, that just enforces why communication within relationships is important.
And I'm glad you brought this up. So communication goes across the entire spectrum of relationships, from God to whoever
Hmm.
and everything else in between.
Yes.
Um, if we're not willing to communicate with God in prayer
Hmm.
and to really have time to listen to what He is saying to us, then that relationship's not going to be as strong as it can be.
Yes.
And it's always going to get stronger the more time that we spend with Him, right? But the reality of it is that we can never spend enough time with God,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And I think and you can also spend time with someone and never really get to know them.
Right.
So with God, we really need to get to know Him, and He already knows us.
Well, it's like the whole aspect of we need to give God the space to talk to us.
Hmm.
That's just like with any relationship, right? If all the conversations are one-sided, then yeah, you're never gonna learn anything about the other person and you're making the relationship all about you. And we can do that with God.
Yeah, and I think relationships, oftentimes people think they're static. They're going to be
Oh, the same the whole time.
right. And so our relationship with God should never be static.
Hmm.
Like my relationship with Debbie over 36 years has been anything but static,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes what creates the problem, there's static that's being created by life events,
Okay, yeah.
which is different. But the static that I'm talking about is that, oh, nothing's ever going to change.
Mm,
Well,
yeah, that's misconception.
as our life circumstances change, guess what? Our relationship is going to change.
Yeah.
Any of a number of reasons I could spout off right now. And you'll run into these things in spiritual mentoring
Yes, yes,
all the time.
yes.
What about you, Lisa?
Well, I think like in spiritual mentoring, I think one of the things that I see often is one of the spouses' relationship with God is deeper than the other.
Oh yeah,
And there's a lot of frustration with the other spouse, or there's maybe different points of view, faith points of view that is causing some uh, issues within the relationship.
Yeah, that disparity of worship
Yeah, yeah.
is, and you actually have to get a dispensation from the bishop to have a disparity of worship. And even just go ahead.
No.
And even disparity of worship between friends can be a problem.
Well, yeah, if certain, I guess because of views, that would lead to argument.
Could
Is
be.
that what you? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, so anywhere where there are differences, there's always an opportunity there to either come together in a fruitful way or to come together in a non-fruitful way,
Right.
or to just not come together at all and not talk about it, which is another thing that you will see
Yeah.
quite often in spiritual mentorship, that people aren't actually talking
to
about
their spouse
to their spouse
about the issue.
or somebody else, right?
Right.
Their family member, their sibling,
Right.
and there's prudence involved in all of this, okay? As to so like take well, I don't want to use that example.
Well, so okay, so the goal of a spouse is to get their spouse to heaven.
Right.
So how do you deal, or how do you what do you talk about as far as like the situations that we just talked about? Like, so like if somebody's faith level is at a higher level and they're trying to do all they can to bring their spouse to the level that they're at, but
Yeah, and they can't bring them there.
yeah.
They have to. It's like anything else. You have
I
to.
know you prayer and fast. Is that what you would?
Well, I think number one, you have to recognize that they have to make the decision
Right, right.
to want to move forward.
Yes,
Like I made my own decision to become Catholic.
yes.
I told Debbie I would never become Catholic. And so I think sometimes you have to be patient with God. Why are you laughing for?
Yeah,
That I would never become Catholic. And
yeah,
here I'm wearing a deacon shirt now. Yeah, don't tell God what you're not going to do. But it's like, I lost my train of thought. That's okay.
it has to be their choice.
It has to be their choice. And you're right. You can pray for them. You can intercede for them. You can sacrifice for them. You can offer intentions for them.
Mhm.
You can have fruitful discussions about how your life is being impacted by your faith. But we can't become discouraged
Yeah.
because if we married them thinking we were going to convert them, then maybe we shouldn't have married them.
Hmm.
Well, that train already left the station. So it's more of a question of what is God calling you to when you have a spouse that you wish was, more engaged in their faith or a common faith. Um, there's a struggle there,
Yeah.
right? And there's a struggle for control,
Hmm.
for what you want. And you really have to commend that person, who in this case is your spouse, to God, that God might intercede or have other people intercede in their life, and that whatever they have going on might, in a more fuller way, conform them to the will of God.
Well, it makes sense because that's what we would do if it was a child, right? An adult child.
Hmm.
Same thing.
Or we would try to force them. And I think this actually brings up a good point, okay, in relationships. Whatever you're doing, if it's creating anger
Hmm.
or dissonance in you, then you probably need to be doing something different.
Yeah.
And doing something different often means not being able to do anything that might actually physically change the reality of whatever relationship you wish would be different.
Right.
But God doesn't want you to be angry. He wants you to be at peace. And so what can you do, like I just described a minute ago,
Hmm.
is really what's more important.
Hmm.
And that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your spouse is not going to church and you're not happy.
Yes.
Not really sure how that's a productive thing.
Right. Right.
What do you think, Lisa?
No, I understand. Yeah.
So how about relationships between parents and children both ways? You
Okay.
want to speak about that a little bit?
Okay. Well, I think sometimes well, a lot of what
I can't do the whole thing.
a lot of what we hear on, especially on retreats, is how people want their adult children to come back to the faith,
Hmm.
and they want to do all they can to tell them all about why they should, and that's not productive. That just drives people away. But the same thing could happen to a or a child who is very much into their faith, and maybe their parents are not. And we've actually heard of some saints like Carlo Acutis, who his parents had no faith, and he I forget how he was going to mass every day, and his mom converted to Catholicism. Go ahead.
No, you're
Oh no, but
listening intently.
what you had said earlier in regards to any type of relationship is you just love them, and you just be present to them, and you just continue to pray and sacrifice for them.
Yeah, we can get caught up in our responsibility or what we feel like is our responsibility and what is actually our responsibility.
Yeah.
So, like when you have a child that's 12 years old, well, guess what? They're your responsibility. But when they turn 18 and they go off and they start doing their own stuff, right? Or they meet someone, well, the nature of your relationship with them has changed, like we said, along with your responsibilities. And so what I have found is like, okay, whenever I've wanted something to change that wasn't changing, it totally consumed
Hmm.
me and any time that I spent with that person that I wish they would change. Because I know that change would be good for them, and I'm right. Not because I'm Deacon Dave, I'm just saying, objectively,
Right.
it would be better for them.
You know the truth.
I know the truth.
Right.
Like I cannot
You
shove
can't
that
force it down their
throat.
throat.
Exactly. And so every time I might be around this relationship, whatever it might be, if I'm so consumed by the fact that this person is not doing something that I just know is so good for them,
Yeah.
then I can't love them.
Right.
I can't love them.
Right.
And I'm not appreciating that moment. I'm not trusting God, if I'm being honest.
Right.
But God's going to operate inside of everyone's free will. But I know God put people, in my path along the way
Hmm.
to guide me on this journey to where I am today.
Right.
And so I think we have to recognize and trust that. And look, God says if I love, well, he says it several different ways. It's, would you give your child a snake or whatever? We just heard the street.
Oh, the scorpion.
And you who are wicked
Hmm.
would not do that to your child. How much more would I do for you?
Yeah.
Or for your children. So it's kind of like we take ownership over things because we care
Yes.
and because we love them
And we know what's right.
and best for them. And so that gives us license.
To.
Just let them know how it is until they get it.
Hmm.
And much destruction has occurred in relationships.
We've heard stories of people that we know that relationships with their children is non-existent because of that.
And it's really sad.
It's very sad.
And so, the alternative to that is to love them where they are, no matter what. And because, wherever there's love, there's God.
Hmm. Right.
So it's like I remember talking to someone one time and they were just talking about all of the stuff that they wish could be different. And I just looked at them and I said, and she says, they don't have God in their life. They don't have God in their life. Are you comfortable? You seem a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I might move a little bit. Continue.
That's fine. So, and I said, do you love your child? And this person goes, well, yes. I said, okay, and who is love? Oh, well, God. I said, oh, so then by virtue of you loving them, they are experiencing God in their life.
Yes.
And they kind of sat back and kind of let that settle in and sink in. And it was a very powerful moment for that person, I believe, to recognize that they don't have control over the outcome. They can only do what they can do, but they can always love.
Yeah.
But there's pain and suffering in love. St. John Paul II said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you see your children or a relationship that is not what it could or should be, it does come along with great pain.
Sure.
And suffering.
Yeah.
And you are just double and tripling down on that when you try to force it to be something different.
Yes.
Never.
And oftentimes it's not, like you said earlier, it's trusting in God, because oftentimes it's not the parent or the family member
Mm-hmm.
who does bring the person to God. It's
somebody else.
Yeah.
And you don't know who that's going to be.
Yes.
And I think we can get so wrapped up. I've been really angry about certain things before as it deals with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I just threw my hands up, said, okay, God, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Just this is just not good for me. And I received peace in a way that I didn't have before, actually, really surrendering that. There are relationships that we have inside of our families that are good relationships that are broken over nothing.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Just like perceived hurts.
Yeah, something that shouldn't have been a big deal.
Yeah.
And it creates a complete division. The other time where the devil really strikes, at least I know in my own life, is in times of grief. And we're going to talk about grief next month. But in times of grief, when we are vulnerable and very much could be emotional, the devil will use that to sever relationships that are maybe already tenuous for reasons that probably aren't really substantial, but yet have come that way. And in that time can strike to just sever a relationship.
That's very common.
Yeah. You want to expand on that?
Well, no, I just think in times of grief, like for instance, like the death in the family, then there's all kinds of fighting over like maybe possessions of the deceased or money, and the sometimes the wishes of the person who's no longer with us are not held up because somebody wants a certain thing, and this just causes like so much division within families that we have seen.
Yeah, when my biological dad died a couple of years ago, I didn't even know he died because his family from his third wife, they didn't they didn't call me, which that in and of itself would be enough to make someone go ballistic. Yeah. 3 months later, I get a obituary in the mail along with a probate document, and that's how I found out that my dad died.
Hmm.
And my dad and I didn't like talk that often, but it's like, and I was actually, and my dad was quite wealthy. They came up with a will that I didn't think was a will
Mm,
because it was from like 1976, and my dad was a financial planner, so I'm pretty sure he had a more recent will than that. At least one would think so. Called up, nobody answered. Somebody called me back. I just told him, you know what, I'm not really worried about anything. Moved on.
yeah.
Wasn't I don't think I could have done that 10 years ago. I
Mm,
think I would have drove down there and just wanted to like just smack someone upside the
yeah.
head for,
Just
you
get
know,
angry and
well, yeah,
yeah,
and why are you trying to like cheat me out of this or
yeah,
do that?
yeah,
Um, because there's like there's like the devil. This is like true stuff. Like,
yeah,
okay, if you ask my wife, I really handled it very well. But the devil was like, you could use that money for the retreat center.
mm,
It's not for you.
hmm,
And that thought crossed my mind.
hmm,
And so that could have caused me, and that in and of itself sounds good, right? Hey, you should go down there and fight to get what you believe is rightfully yours because you can give all the money to the retreat center, which is what I would do. I would have done that either way.
yeah,
And, but I said, no, I'm not going to enter into this mess
right,
because I know what is going to happen. And so you're right, though. Far worse has happened over far less
yeah,
because of, as you were describing it, the deadly sins:
yeah, yeah,
pride,
hmm,
greed,
hmm,
envy.
envy, hmm,
I mean, those
hmm,
three right there,
hmm, hmm,
big time,
hmm.
right? And
Even gluttony, like, oh, I want more.
yeah, yeah. But just think about the envy piece of what was going on. If I truly were entitled to something, and I'll never really know, the envy that was inside of that, right? To not let me have what was mine, to take away from me what would have been given to me.
Right.
And I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. But I think I share that story because there definitely would have been a time where I would have drove my butt down there
Yeah.
and went right over to the house and said, "What do you think you're doing right
Yeah.
now?" And I would have fought tooth and nail. And I am plenty capable right now to have been able to do that. But I said, you know what? It's not worth it.
Hmm.
And so I think trusting in God, leaning into God
Hmm.
in that particular case. And I think this speaks to unhealthy relationships.
Right.
Go ahead. Did you want to talk about it?
Well, I think anytime there's some sort of division within the family, whether it be because of a loss or grief, or whether it be from different points of views
Or
or
wounds?
wounds, right? I think that there's there could be resentment, there could be anger, there could be isolation, or even like, oh, I'm not even going to deal with this person or talk to this person anymore. And
Hmm.
we've seen that, like, people who will refuse to talk to a sibling because of something from the past that they just never communicated about and never talked things out. And it's all about like a lack of forgiveness.
Yeah, and they probably don't even remember what it was they were mad about.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like both you and I, Lisa, have read, and I think we've already talked about forgiveness in one of our classes,
Not
but
yet.
not coming. So let's just a little teaser here. Um, Forgiveness like opens us up to attack. We have talked about spiritual warfare,
Yeah.
and unforgiveness is one of the primary ways that that is a vulnerability that we have that the demon will take up residence inside of that vulnerability. Lisa.
And it is one of the biggest obstacles to healing, spiritual healing, emotional healing, and even in some cases physical healing.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that in order to receive that healing, right, and whatever it is that you're mad at, maybe you don't even remember, you need to forgive.
Yes. Yeah, and unforgiveness can lead to like more the devil having more access to your to you
And to your family.
and to your family. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because we think these things don't affect us, but the reality of it is it's huge.
Yeah.
And so we have to be willing to call it what it is and then invite the Lord into it so that he can give us the strength to forgive. Because it's just not worth it.
Right.
I mean, for so many years, and even just knowing that you need to forgive. Right. So like I was always upset with my dad because of and this is a relationship thing, and
Yeah.
I think we both talked to plenty of people where there are parental difficulties and relationships and hurts and the list goes on. Would you agree with that? But for so long, my identity, as you say, my identity was found in how my dad treated me. So we talked about identity, but there was also, that hurt was prideful in a way, right?
You were being prideful?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and this is kind of a complex issue, right? Because we talked about how when you were thinking of yourself and not focused on God, that in and of
Yes.
itself, even in
Yes.
the midst of hurt, is a
It's
prideful act.
prideful.
Okay. And so when I reoriented myself towards God, recognizing that he loves me perfectly and he is my identity, and I took my focus away from that hurt, okay, I was able to forgive my dad, okay, for the many years of just not being around and making false promises and not showing up. It's almost a joke around the house for the longest time. Like he said he was going to come visit, and I said, well, when you get to the driveway, let me know. Otherwise, I got to the point where I just was worried about it, but I was still angry about it.
Sure.
It was annoying,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I finally just got to the point where, okay, I'm going to forgive my dad. And it wasn't something where I said, hey, I forgive you. That wasn't required because I don't know that he would have even understood.
Right. Right.
It doesn't really
And it's
matter.
not important. Yeah.
What was important is that I forgave him
Yeah. Right.
and I have peace.
Right.
Okay. And that's why I was able to respond the way I did when they didn't tell me that he died, which is just like completely the most rude thing possible.
Right.
Right. And we've heard of other family members where this has happened. And so it's like, boy, the devil, he is just ready to just hop on that train with you of like, you have been just mistreated. This is wrong. This is an injustice. And he's just right there. He's like, here, let me throw some more coal in that train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's heat it up a little bit more. See if we can pick up some speed. And you need to run with that.
Yes. Right. You need to take care of this.
And the Lord is saying, all you really need is me.
Right.
And I think the relationship that we probably put the least amount of attention to is the one with Jesus. And if we would put more time into our relationship with him so that he can minister to us, Lisa, it would help us in all of our other relationships.
It's the most important relationship.
Yeah, so like you and I, we're tight, right? But I can still hurt you because I'm broken. And I don't always do or say the right thing or respond the way that you would hope that I might respond or not respond when you were looking for a response, right? So there's these expectations that come along, which, when you're really good friends with someone and there's a trust level there, we can have expectations. And one would hope that those would be met in someone who really cares about you. Even someone who cares about you can still hurt you. And they're not even trying to hurt you.
Right, right. And sometimes it's a perceived hurt by the one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when we recognize, hey, our relationships aren't going to be perfect, but when I start expecting and putting more value on other relationships than on putting most of my value on the one relationship that's really important,
Hmm.
then that's where I'm setting myself up. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. And I think that in like spiritual mentorship, that when we try to encourage people to spend time with God, quality time with God, like there's a reason for that, you know? Because yeah, in everything that we experience, like we need God, we need Jesus to allow us to be open to fill us with his love and his peace and his joy so that it remains in him versus what we're experiencing or what's going on in our lives or in the world.
Yeah, one of the saying, I think you're absolutely right. One of the sayings you often hear is the ones you love are the ones that will hurt you the most. Have you ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
So the closer you are to someone, the higher your level of expectation.
Okay.
Actually, the easier it is for them to hurt you,
Okay.
right?
Well, that's why we shouldn't have expectations, right?
Exactly, but we
Yeah.
do,
But our
right?
natural tendency is,
Right.
yeah.
It's like okay, so like people that have like driven me nuts, right? And I'm like, okay, God, you need to do something about this person. This is all relationship driven, right? You need to do something about this person. And he's like, no, you need to do something about you, Dave, right? And you need to, I love saying this, how is this relationship that you're struggling with this person going to help me and you grow together, is what
Mm-hmm.
God says.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's by me realizing that he's all that I really need,
Yes.
right? That I don't have to let this have control over me,
Right.
that I can still have peace. That's how I'm going to go closer to God.
Right.
I'm too busy wanting God to change the other person.
Right.
And so it's like, and I'm getting to a point here. So it's like,
Figured.
sorry, God, God, God is making progress, right? And it's like in relationships, what to be like, really cognizant of this. You're like, okay, I've got peace now. Everything's going good. Um, and then all of a sudden, the relationship that you're struggling with, that person maybe does a few things, and you're like, oh, hey, God's making some progress in this person.
Mm-hmm.
Guard goes down, expectations start to go up, and then
Oh,
boom,
yeah.
you get hit because you started wanting something or
Mm,
desiring something that was not really there.
yeah.
And God's going, okay, Lisa, oh, right up here, Lisa.
Yeah.
I'm right behind you there. That divine mercy picture work right there. Can I point to it right? That's all you need. So, but it's so easy. And I'm thinking about specific situations, right?
Mhm.
It could be work, it could be ministry, and you can get lulled into a false sense of relationship, relationship security.
Mm.
I've never said that before.
Huh. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so don't get me wrong. I think there are safe relationships, right? We have really strong relationships with people, with our spouses that are super solid. We can still be hurt inside of those relationships, but hopefully we communicate, as you said earlier, right? And then we move forward in light of that, knowing that that love that we have for that person remains.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that hasn't changed. And the devil wants you to say that, well, the reason they hurt you was because they don't love you.
Right, right.
And so the lies that are starting to come from this
Yes,
that we can listen to
yes.
can do damage
Right,
and create
right,
division.
right,
It's all about that.
right,
All
right.
about creating division.
Yes, yes.
But there are other relationships where we're just called to love and we haven't talked about this word. Detach.
Mm.
Detach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that y'all heard that because I wasn't looking at the screen. Detach. So people that we struggle with, right, where we're turning back to God, and we pray for that person, we offer intentions for that person, but we detach from all of the feelings and the hurt and maybe the things that continue to happen, right? We have to detach from those
Yeah.
and not take ownership over them. And then, as I was saying, maybe that person, you sense every now and again, oh, maybe they're coming around. And so you start to expect something different. I want to say this again because I think this is important because I've really struggled with this. You start to expect something in that relationship that's not there.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, you just got kicked back 3 levels,
Yeah.
right? Because you
Yeah.
didn't keep your eyes focused on God.
Right.
And it's not that you can't look for the best in a person. It's just when you see the best in them, give God thanks and praise for that. And then the next day you're like, what happened? Oh my goodness, I can't believe this person did that. I thought they were getting better. Well, that's between them and God.
Yeah.
Your job is to be detached, to love God, and to see the best in each person, right? But to not get attached to something. Oh, yeah. It starts out with consuming. Anyway, what are you thinking? Sorry.
No, I think that's an excellent point because I think sometimes we do put these false expectations on relationships. And yeah, you're exactly right. That's where the hurt can show up. But like you have said, expectations are premeditated resentment.
Ooh, wow. Laying the smackdown on that. I'd forgotten all about that. Can you say that again?
Expectations are premeditated resentment.
Think about that, people. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Because how often do we expect something and we are let down?
Right.
Probably more often than not.
Right.
Unless his name is Jesus.
Right.
Of course, having said that, in our relationship with God, and it's a different dynamic because he's God. And so like, you want me to do what, God? You want me to suffer this? Do you want me to go through this? This is how you want me to respond to this? I mean, I think that that's a healthy dialogue. That like, okay, or this just happened to my spouse who's now sick. I mean, God is ultimately wanting you to just go, look, I'm all you really need.
Yeah.
And I think that that is the lesson of relationship, is that at the end of the day, we will seek all of these other relationships. We will want certain things out of these relationships. But Jesus is ultimately the only one we need.
Yes.
Now, of course, he created marriage, right? But really, this is what I like to see. I have to remind people of this. Because I had someone tell me one time, I said, well, I'm not working now, and so I feel like I'm not carrying my end of the deal. And I'm like, well, I said, remember when you got married? I said, the two became one. You're one. You're not two. So there is no two. There's only one, which is you, your spouse, and Jesus. And it was a good perspective, right? Because when we start somehow taking ourselves out of any relationship, especially like marriage, as if we're some isolated part that has to hold up our part of the partnership, like we talked about,
right?
It can make us feel that way.
Yeah.
Because it's not like this person's not trying to hold up their end of the deal,
right?
If you will,
right?
They're doing what they agreed on. This is kind of the movement of their marriage, and so we don't have to like isolate and think that we're not holding up our end of the deal. What are you thinking?
No, that makes sense.
Are you getting tired?
Yeah.
You are? Any other thoughts?
Well, I think maybe do we want to talk about our relationship with God?
I thought we've been doing that.
Oh, okay.
What do you want to say? Go ahead.
Well, I just think it's important that people understand that it's okay to be angry at God. And like you said earlier, like to have a dialogue with him and to tell him why you're angry. And it's okay to yell and shout and scream.
Sounds like you're speaking from personal
Oh
experience.
yeah, I've done it. And then go to confession afterwards. But that, like you have said before, is a sign of relationship.
And then what do you do after you finish yelling?
Say I'm sorry.
What else?
Um,
Listen.
yeah. No, actually, That's true. One time when I was like super angry at God and I was yelling at him, like after I let it all out, I received like this great sense of peace.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and sometimes that's what we need, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being in adoration, and you heard the story more than once, and I just kind of let him have it about some stuff, and he's just like, just stop it already.
Yeah.
You're he did. It's like, I just really like, was almost like imagining like him putting his hand out and going, just stop it, David. You're overcomplicating all of this. And we do overcomplicate our relationship with God and our relationships with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, right, he didn't come to abolish the law. He came to fulfill the law. And the law was very, very simple in his eyes. Love God and love one another
hmm
as I have loved you.
hmm
That's it.
Yeah.
And we like, oh boy, do we overcomplicate it and
Yeah.
create a lot of stuff and a lot of what is created is because of our own sinfulness, our own desires, to have things. I mean, as I'm sitting here having this discussion on relationships, I can really see how the seven deadly sins play into all of the divisiveness of relationships in a real way.
hmm
And so, what's the counteract to those vices, Lisa?
Virtue.
Yes, woo, virtues. As Lisa would say, you got to bring the virtues in, right?
Invite God to gift you with the virtue.
Right. You get you got to work on them. Your temperance, your
Strengthen
prudence, your
your
fortitude.
virtue.
Yeah, but what are the theological virtues?
Hope, faith, love.
Right. So we have faith, right,
hmm
which is belief in action. So we have to believe first and foremost in who God is and what He can do. We can have hope that He's leading us where we need to be, right? And then we have to do it with love.
hmm
And then there's, of course, the theological virtue. I mean, I'm sorry, the cardinal virtues. Do you know what they are?
Temperance, fortitude,
Prudence,
prudence,
justice.
just.
Very good, Lisa. So, and then underneath all of these virtues are like sub virtues of things.
Which there's like 200.
All right. So this is what's really interesting in the spiritual warfare book. Okay. And this is true in relationships now that I'm thinking about it. This has actually been a pretty cool episode. Even if I do say so myself.
It's nice not to have to read
I know.
slides.
It's much better actually.
It is.
But like we so often focus on the vice,
Yeah.
or in this case in a relationship, what someone did wrong, or what we wish could have been differently or should have been differently or whatever. And in this book, it says the way that you drive out vice is by growing in virtue. So our focusing on the vice, I thought this was actually one of the better points of the book.
Okay.
Our focusing on the vice is not going to remove the vice. Our focusing on the virtue actually repels the vice.
Okay.
Right? Because so think about it. If we're focused on the vice, what are we focused on?
Ourselves.
Right, and evil.
And evil.
Right.
Okay.
But if we're focused on virtue,
we're focused on God.
And God drives out evil.
Yeah.
Drop the mic. Anything else, Lisa, on relationships?
The relationship with Jesus is the most important one.
Yes.
Focus on that.
Focus on that, and every other relationship will come into focus. Even the ones that are really difficult.
Yeah.
All right, because He's going to give you all you need.
Yeah.
I am Deacon Dave, along with
Layperson Lisa.
See you next time. Now we'll be really upset.